Hey guys, I'm Steve, commercial photographer and fine art photographer from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Back here with episode number 2 in the Basics of Photography program with inPath. If you're just tuning in now, head back to lesson 1 first and kind of get an idea of where we're starting from. In that episode, I've taught the basics of how to frame a subject and different perspectives on taking a photo. In this lesson, we're gonna learn how to take really sharp photos, how to blur out the background in pictures in a really simple way with both phones and cameras. We're also gonna learn how to find lighting in photos, whether you're outside looking at natural light or you're inside just with the available light that's around in your house. We're gonna look for ways to find that lighting and be able to use that on our subject to take a really cool picture. All you're gonna need today is your phone camera or a DSLR if you've got one. Whether it's sunny or cloudy outside right now, wherever you are, it's worth going out after this and just having an idea of what things look like. Besides that, if there's a lamp in your house, that's something that you can use in with this episode as well, and that's it. So let's talk about depth of field. What is depth of field? Basically, it's the focus inside of your picture. Whether you have a shallow depth of field, which is where a little tiny thing is in focus in your picture and the rest is blurred out, or you have a deep depth of field where everything in your picture is in focus and there's a lot of detail everywhere. So how do we take a sharp picture? Usually with your phone and your camera, when you're taking a picture in automatic, the photo's always gonna be pretty sharp. And by sharp, it means there's a lot of detail, there's not a lot out of focus. The conditions when you're shooting in automatic are usually very well lit for you to have a picture where everything is in focus, or if you're taking a picture of something very far away and so all the details are coming out. But the harder thing is taking a picture with a shallow depth of field, especially if you're not really used to using these cameras yet. Some of the new phones have different settings where it builds in a fake depth of field, like portrait mode if you've got an iPhone, or like macro settings where it kind of creates that very shallow depth of field naturally. But let's say you don't have that right now, and let's say your camera, you don't really understand the aperture, so you can't blur out the picture just the way you want it. What you can do in that situation is get really close to the picture. So if you've got a DSLR, you can zoom the lens all the way in so that it's very close to your subject. And then when you take a picture of something close with the camera zoomed in, it doesn't matter that you're in automatic. It's actually gonna be able to allow you to blur the background out and make that picture have that kind of moody feel to it. If you're on an iPhone or an Android, it works the same way, where you can get really close to the subject and you can just touch focus on what you're taking a picture of, and you'll notice that if you're really close to what you're taking a picture of, the background's gonna naturally blur out. And that's because the phone has an aperture that's already fairly open, which lets it blur out, but it doesn't actually allow you to blur out things when you're taking a wider picture unless you get really close. Keep in mind that if you get too close to your subject, it just might not focus. Depending on what type of phone and what type of camera you're using or what type of lens is on that camera, it may only let you get a certain distance from whatever you're taking a picture of, so you might have to play around with the distance a bit, but the closest point is always going to have that blurred out background, so keep that in mind. If you're really getting the hang of it and you're really comfortable with your camera right now, and some phones that have manual settings, what you can do is you can switch the dial to the AV or the A mode on it, which is Aperture Priority. What Aperture Priority does is it allows you to have the camera work completely in automatic, so it's going to do all the thinking for you, it's going to do all the technical work for you right now while you're getting used to the camera, but it's going to let you use this top dial here or on an icon, the front dial, to open and close your aperture. And what the aperture is basically, if you think about the human eye, and when the light's really on your eye, your pupil is very tiny, and when you're in a dark area, your pupil opens up very wide. And the aperture works the same way, where when light hits it and it's too bright, the aperture will naturally close. And when it closes, there's a lot of detail, there's a lot of focus. Where there's not a lot of light, the aperture is going to open up very wide, and it's going to allow any amount of light in, the same as your eye in the dark. Your iris opens up very wide to allow more light in. And when that aperture is open, you'll be able to blur out more things in your photo and have that perspective where one thing's in focus and the the rest of it's all blurry. So when you switch your camera or your phone to aperture mode, you're gonna be able to open that aperture up to be able to blur your subject by putting it to the lowest number. And when you do that, the camera is gonna think for itself and adjust all the other settings so that there's not too much light coming in when you do it. And you can practice with that anywhere. It works inside, it works outside. It works usually when you're taking a picture of something very specific if you're trying to get a soft focus. But I would just go out and just take a look at different things. Try taking pictures of things from different distances, or zoom in with your camera and take a picture of something close with the background blurred out, and then without moving the camera, zoom it out and take that same picture, and you can just see how the focus adjusts. It's important to know what you want in a photo, whether you want a lot of detail and focus and a lot of like detail on your subject, or if you want something where the subject's kind of got the detail and everything around it is fading out. If you can figure this out in your mind and have that idea, using these different focus techniques is going to help you be able to get that picture and really get some emotion into your photo. It's also important because it sets a mood, but keep in mind that not every picture needs to have a blurred out background where you can't see what it is, and not every picture needs to have all this detail. You can kind of have both if you understand it and if you really practice. Sometimes it's great to have your subject in focus, but the background is relatable to your subject and it's out of focus, but not so much so that you don't know what it is. You can still tell what's going on in the background and it still complements your photo. And then when you incorporate the techniques from lesson 1, where you have a rule of thirds and it's soft focus, and so the background's blurry in your rule of thirds, but it still tells the story of your subject. Now you're building this whole story around your picture.